We'll talk about every time Brian deserved to go to jail in Family Guy. Number 3. I've spot on this list. I'm including one of the sickest episodes of Family Guy I have ever seen. Herpy the Love Sore. Stewie joins Brian as he watches the outlaw Josie Wales, specifically a part where Clint Eastwood's character makes a Blood Brothers act with the Indian chief. He's never seen this type of bonding before, so Brian explains how people mix their blood as a way to reinforce a closer bond. And well, there's a certain aspect of the ritual that sounds appealing to Stewie, so Brian agrees to go through with it, and the pair seal their friendship, making Stewie feel a lot more secure, a feeling and decision he'll come to regret. The next morning, Stewie wakes up with his lips stuck to his pillow and checks his mirror to see that he has a disgusting sore on his face. Not just any Sarah herpes. Clearly, Stewie didn't get a herpes sore in the traditional manner, let's say. So he goes to his most obvious suspect, Brian, but this is where the most disturbing plot twists of the entire show come in after ripping into Brian. The dog makes his confession, okay fine, I admit it. Oh, he also tells Stewie it isn't a big deal, cause you know he hadn't already made this bad enough. So Stewie tries to cover up his STD at daycare, but his disguise could have been a touch more believable since most 1-year-old babies don't grow a beard overnight. Shocking. I know it's an easy spot for the teacher who rips off his disguise, exposing his disease to the class who run away in fear. It's not the only difficult interaction Stewie has to have that day as he returns home to tell Rhett that he should probably get himself tested as he has herpes. Chris overhears their conversation and shows off a disgusting herpes sore of his own. Even worse, he also got it from Brian in a Blood Brothers, so the two pair up to form the ultimate revenge duo and start by interrupting his dates to let the woman know that he's carrying an STD. It's effective, and it's only the beginning. Brian finally says enough is enough when the pair hack his Facebook account and change his name and profile picture to something more fitting. He says he will give them whatever they want to fix things. Chris asks to borrow his Prius to drive to the end of the block and back, and Stewie requests a date with Nev Campbell. Brian can't deliver on the Nev Campbell date for obvious reasons, and Stewie admits that he was just making it hard on the dog because, for the first time in his life, he couldn't trust him. I let you down. I guess I was just too embarrassed to admit I had herpes. Is Family Guy really trying to manipulate me into thinking that giving a baby an STD is excusable out of embarrassment? The episode wraps up with Stewie realizing that he now has to live the rest of his life with herpes, but Brian reminds him that it's not that bad since it only flares up during stressful times. I mean, every day is a stressful time, with this family married with cancer is the episode. At number 2 in this episode being The Wolf of Wall Street, which unfortunately doesn't include Margot Robbie. The very first scene of the episode has Brian walking in on Stewie, who has filled his room with every single coin-operated horse and cog, so he doesn't have to wait in line anymore. Brian isn't confused about Stewie being on a unicorn, but he is confused about how a 1-year-old could possibly afford all of them and is using the help of a teleprompter, of course. So they move on, and Brian later goes to pick up Stewie from preschool, where he pulls out of his parking spot into the back of Consuela's car. No, did I nail it? Brian immediately drives off from the scene since he doesn't have insurance. You know, for a guy who preaches about his intelligence all the time, he sure can make stupid decisions. Stewie tells him he can get him a hefty return on the $100 to pay for the damages if Brian lets him invest in the stock market. The dog caves within a few seconds. Well done sticking to your original stance. Brian Stewie manages to not only get $1,000 back to fix his car, but also an extra $1,000 in profit. Brian is seeing dollar signs in his eyes. He must learn how to invest in the market. Stewie agrees to teach him on one condition. Brian must teach him the art of gymkata, the fusion of gymnastics and karate sounds legit. No, Stewie, I won't do that. It's too dangerous, but like with every other thing he's ever said, Brian goes back on his word and teach us do it. It doesn't take long for Brian to start to see returns on his investments, but he vows to keep his morals and donate $1 for each dollar he makes to cancer research. And you'll never guess what he goes back on this to, and instead rents a Ferrari with Stewie. Later in the episode, Brian takes Stewie to a new potential investor, a shady-looking Korean business that makes protein shakes alarm bells are ringing in Stewie's head as he sees boarded-up windows and security guards outside, and he's right to be worried, because when he walks inside, he finds out exactly why the company is so cheap to invest in, because he lacks morals of any kind. Brian still agrees to a meeting with the company Hell. Even Stewie said no after seeing this. So Brian's basically making it clear he has no issue with animal abuse and legal workplace practices, even with his own kind, as long as he gets rich from it. He walks in ready for the meeting, only to be given an investor's rag that is laced with chloroform. Knocking the dog out instantly, he wakes up to find himself locked in a cage along with the other dogs he'd seen earlier. Well, would you look at that? Brian Stewie realizes Brian is missing, and goes on a rescue mission. He stealths his way into the fact only to be met with security guards who are dragging Brian to his certain death. But that's no issue for Stewie, who lands on a pommel horse in Lyra before cranking up the volume of Life as a Highway and taking out the guard using Jim Cater. Wait, that was real, Stewie. Oh my god, thank you. I must learn this art. Brian does apologize to Stewie, the only good thing he does in this episode, but he still blames the evils of Wall Street. Stewie instantly calls out Brian for blaming everyone but himself, explaining that he's been in the business his whole life and never once folded like Brian did. Money is the root of all evil, no. At number 1 is The Finer Strings, an episode where Brian takes the role of a carer. It sounds promising, but just you wait. Lois worries about her dad's cataracts as he mistakes Bryce Dallas Howard for Jessica Chastain at a high school play in his defense. When he also mistakes Carrot Top for Jessica Chastain, Lois decides enough is enough and forces him into getting the surgery. The surgery is a success, but he's left temporarily blinded, which allows Lois to lie about how many family members showed up to support him. If you couldn't tell, he's not the most loved grandpa. Dr. Hartman advises Carter to have someone around to help him during his recovery. Lois lies again and explains that she has no time to help, but does offer Brian up as a service dog. There isn't much that Brian wouldn't do for a chance to impress Lois, so he agrees to move in with Carter while he recovers. It doesn't start off as the most ideal job for Brian, as Carter has a long list of weird jobs to do for him. It's so satisfying watching Brian have to deal with this, working for what he always complains about rich people. But when he gets to experience helicopter ride and butler service, Brian realizes he can get used to the life of the elite. Not in the least bit surprised. Carter's next checkup with Dr. Hartman reveals that his eyes are fully healed, so he no longer has any need for Brian without so much as a thanks. Carter leaves Brian in the dust. Brian returns to the Griffin home and struggles to readapt to the real world in Lowe's cooking. I have literally no idea how. But Brian comes to the conclusion that he and Carter had become friends, and that he had accidentally offended Carter by offering work rather than friendship. You're not kidding anyone. We all know. You don't care about Carter. You only care about his money. Get him Stewie. He invites himself into Carter's home but instantly gets kicked out naturally. He goes to rant to Stewie about how mad he is and fesses up to actually just missing the money and not the friendship, and then he goes on to say one of the wildest things he ever has. I almost wish Carter was still blind so he'd still need me. Stewie makes it very clear that he's not blind, which only gives Brian the idea that he could become blind again. Hey 911, it's me again to try and get Stewie on board with his plan. Brian lies and tells the baby that Carter said that Stewie would never cut it as a member of One Direction. This is enough to fuel the fire in Stewie, who agrees to help Brian blind Carter the pair. Corner him in the locker room, coming out of the shower and spray tap water from Flint, Michigan in his eyes. Brian rushes up and acts as a hero, but quickly realizes that the water has done more damage than he was wanting. It's a brutal scene, and Brian tries to apologize for letting money guide him. Why does he always have to let the absolute worst happen before he sees reason? Even the writers aren't interested in seeing how Brian tries to fix his mistakes as Stewie pulls lever for a hasty wrap-up, which cuts us to a healed Carter, talking about how everyone has learned their lesson from the attack. The trio hug it out, and we're just... If you enjoyed the video, you can choose 2 options that we put on the video for you, and don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.